Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. Today I want to show you the results of my latest netcode delay tests for Call of Duty Modern Warfare and talk about what changed since I tested the beta. Close after the release of the game, the developers published a video where they explain how the netcode works in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. In that video, the developers only talk about the dedicated server network model, which is why I could think that this is the only network model used in Modern Warfare. Sadly, that is not the case. While big games like Fortnite and Overwatch, as well as many smaller games, run custom matches on dedicated servers, Modern Warfare sadly does not do that and instead still uses the Listen server network model, where one player is also the server or host. Many players refer to this network model as peer-to-peer, which is not correct. There is a link to my Netcode 101 video in the description down below if you want to find out more about the peer-to-peer network model and what makes it very different. Now, the fact that custom matches don't use dedicated servers is disappointing, especially for competitive players and esports, as custom matches also run at a much lower tick rate, which we will get to in a minute. The larger issue, however, is that based on screenshots and video clips I got from other Call of Duty players, it doesn't seem like the matchmaking uses only dedicated servers, because one of the key benefits of the dedicated server network model is that you don't encounter a host migration. So the official video, which talks about the dedicated server network model as if the game would only use dedicated servers, doesn't seem to tell the whole story. But to be fair, Call of Duty games have used a mix of dedicated servers and Listen servers for many years now. And every year I criticize that players have no way to tell if they play on a dedicated server or if the match is hosted by another player. The only way for you to tell is by checking the IP addresses of the connections established by the game, or once you see a host migration. Well, maybe the latency values in the scoreboard allow you to find out if you play on a dedicated server or not. You see, the latency value is not just the round trip time of the data that travels back and forth between your client and the server. It also includes the processing delay of at least the client. This is why your latency will increase when the frame rate goes down and decrease when the frame rate goes up. When you create a custom match, then the network delay is less than 1 millisecond, as you are the server, which means that all that's left is the processing delay. So when you host a match while the game runs at 144 FPS, you will see about 7 milliseconds in the latency overlay and the scoreboard. This means that when you see a player with a latency of 7 or 8 milliseconds, then he either lives right next to the data center where the server is hosted, or you are in a match which is hosted by another player, and that player is the host. So if a match feels extremely bad and you see one player with 8 milliseconds or less, then you might not be playing on a dedicated server, and so at a much lower tick rate and with all the downsides that come with having a player host the match. You can learn more about the downsides of the Listen server network model in my Netcode 101 video. Now let's take a look at the update rates at which the game sends and receives data. Just like in the beta, the developers decided to close the game as soon as you launch Wireshark, which I used to take a look at the network traffic. As I said in my last video, I have no idea why they do that. If that's supposed to be an anti-cheat measure, then it's pretty useless, because even I can get around that in less than 10 seconds. In Gunfight, I've seen the game client send an average of 64 packets per second to the server, and the server send an average of 57 packets per second to the client. That said, the actual send rate, and so most likely also the tick rate of the server, is 62 Hz. The average is lower because between rounds the server's send rate drops down to 15. But that has no impact on the network delay, as during the matches you receive 62 packets per second. Domination looks very similar, with the client sending an average of 64 packets per second to the server, and the server sending an average of 61 packets per second to the client. Same in Domination 20, with the client sending 67 packets per second and the server sending 62 packets per second. That drop in the send rate occurred when I accidentally alt-tabbed out of the game, so you can just ignore that. So up until now we had average send rates of more than 60 packets per second, and I did not see any split packets, which means that the client and the server can fit the data of an update into a single data packet. That is sadly not the case in Ground War, where the server sends an average of 22 packets per second to the client. But these are not 22 updates per second, as sometimes the server must split the data of one update across multiple packets, which is a problem, as even minor packet loss can then cause that you lose an entire update when just one of these split packets doesn't reach your client. That said, I've seen fewer split packets in the final than in the beta, so that's an improvement. So in all game modes except for Ground War, it seems like the game is running at a tick rate of 62 Hz. Matches which are hosted by a player do not run at 62 Hz though. When you play a custom match, which should also apply to player-hosted matches that you end up on through matchmaking, then you play at a tick rate of around 12 Hz. That has a massive impact on your online experience, as you can surely imagine, and it might explain why sometimes matches feel extremely bad, while others, which most likely ran on a dedicated server, felt much better. And that's why you want matchmaking and custom games to use dedicated servers only. Another thing the netcode video did not explain are the network performance icons which are in the game now. The high latency warning is straightforward. It shows up in yellow when your latency to the server is between 150 to 249 milliseconds. And it turns red when your latency is higher than 250 milliseconds. I highly appreciate that the developers added that icon, but in my opinion these values are too high. I'd show the yellow icon between 100 to 149 milliseconds, and past 150 milliseconds I'd show the red icon, because at these values your experience will already be negatively affected. Then there's the packet loss icon, which should show up when data doesn't reach its destination. Or it should show up when that happens. I've tried to find out how much packet loss is required to trigger that icon, but even with more than 10% packet loss I could not get the icon to show up consistently. So I'm not sure if it is even hooked up properly at the moment. Same for the latency variation warning icon, which should alarm you when your latency isn't stable. Even when I had my latency change by 70 milliseconds, the icon didn't show up, so I'm not sure if that even works right now. Then there is a packet burst icon in the files of the game client, which I'm honestly not sure what it should warn us about. The disconnect icon is pretty straightforward, as it tells you that you lost the connection to the server. Then there's a collision stream icon, where I've honestly no idea what that could be. Server performance is again quite simple, as it means that the server has an issue which you can't do anything about. And lastly, there's an extrapolation warning icon in the files of the game client, which most likely means that the simulation done by the server differs from the simulation done by the client. That usually occurs when your game experiences massive frame rate drops, where a stall or freeze is especially bad. High latency variation or bandwidth issues can also cause problems with the extrapolation, at least in other games where the developers did provide an explanation for similar icons and metrics. One thing to consider here is that just because these icons exist in the game doesn't mean that they are active yet. So maybe some of these will start to work later on, or maybe they are just leftovers and won't ever be used. So again, I'm very happy and grateful that the developers created that Call of Duty Modern Warfare netcode explained video and that they added these network performance icons to the game. But I'd really like to see them do a follow-up video, where they talk about listen servers in custom games as well as in matchmaking, explain what drives these network warning icons, as well as what the player can do to fix the issue which triggers the icon. Now, before we take a look at my end-to-end network delay test results, let's take a very quick look at the bandwidth used by the game client in the various game modes. As you can see here, while the game modes with more players need more download bandwidth, playing these modes should not be an issue for most players. Now, just like in the beta, testing Call of Duty Modern Warfare on public servers was quite a challenge. First I had to get my test players on the same server and into different teams, which was a time-consuming process to say the least. And once I managed to get them onto the same server, I had very little time to run my tests, as my players got killed very fast on the small and crowded maps. Nevertheless, I could at least once get the promised lag compensation test done to show that a player with a low and stable ping to the server does indeed receive damage behind cover when he gets shot by a player who has a bad connection to the server. Now, while Call of Duty Modern Warfare does heavily favor the experience of the shooter, I must say that because Modern Warfare has such a short time to kill, things happen very fast. I frequently believe that I shot first and the other player should have died, not me. But when I then watch my recorded gameplay frame by frame, then I almost always find out that even though I might have pressed the left mouse button first, on screen I did not fire first. So I do have to test the input delay of this game, but based on my gameplay captures, most if not nearly all situations where I thought that something strange happened turned out to show that I either did not shoot first or my aim was just a little bit off. So that still has to be considered when you criticize the netcode in this game, and I would like the time to kill to be increased just a little bit. Now let's take a look at the end-to-end network delay between two players, which both had a stable and low latency connection to the server during my tests. The results from the beta were not very good, and quite a lot worse than what I measured in Black Ops 4. When I tested the beta of Modern Warfare, the latency value inside the game was broken, but I could ping the game server. In the final version of the game, the in-game latency overlay is working now, but the developers seem to have reconfigured their servers so that they don't respond to an ICMP ping anymore. So you have to consider that when you now compare these results. With an in-game latency of 28 milliseconds, I measured very good network delays for damage, gunfire and player movement in Domination 20, as well as Domination, Team Deathmatch and Kill Confirmed. Some players said that they experience lower network delays when they disable crossplay. In my tests, it made no difference if I had crossplay enabled or disabled. It did not affect the delay between my two test players. So in all game modes with up to 20 players, the network delays are quite good now, and I did not see any split packets. Sadly, just like Blackout, Ground War is too much for the server to run at 62 Hz, and so you get much longer network delays as well as a higher risk of minor packet loss causing larger issues due to packet splitting. So that is the current state of the netcode in this game. I hope that the developers will continue to release patches very frequently and that they will tell us what's going on with players experiencing host migrations in a game that is supposedly using dedicated game servers only. I'd also like to get an official explanation for the network performance icons that are present in the game, and I'm sure many players would like to hear from the developers why they decided to have custom games run at 12 Hz and be hosted by a player, instead of using dedicated servers for these as well, like Fortnite, Overwatch and many other games do. And that's all for today. Big shout out to my patrons as their support allows me to create videos like this one. If you enjoy my content and would like to join these great people who support me, then you can find a link to my Patreon page in the description down below, where you will also find links to my social accounts in case that you want to stay up to date on the videos that I'm working on. So if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris and this was Battle Nonsense.